The night was colder than the children had ever known. The walls of the old house did nothing to keep the wind away. Holes in the wooden frame let the icy air pass through like knives. Two small alien children sat on the cracked floor, holding each other tightly. Their stepfather stood above them, his shadow long and cruel. "You eat too much," he growled, his voice shaking with anger. "Every day I bring food, and every day you leave nothing for me. You are nothing but greedy mouths." The children lowered their eyes. They were too afraid to answer. Their small hands clutched their thin stomachs. Hunger had been their only companion for weeks. They had not eaten too much. They had eaten too little, but still he blamed them. The stepfather's heavy boots echoed as he paced the room. His sharp eyes burned with hatred. He had never wanted these children. They were not his blood. They were the children of the woman he had married, and since she died, his cruelty had only grown worse. "You are useless," he shouted, slamming his hand against the wall. Dust fell from the ceiling. "I should leave you here to starve." The younger child, a girl with bright eyes, began to cry. Her brother pulled her close, whispering that she must stay quiet. They had learned silence was safer. The stepfather turned toward the door. His coat was already packed, his bag already full. He had made his decision. "I will not waste my life feeding you," he spat. "I am leaving. You can eat the dirt, if you want. That is all you deserve." The children froze. For a moment they thought it was another one of his cruel threats. But this time, his eyes were empty of care. He pulled the door open, letting in a blast of cold air. Without looking back, he stepped into the night. The door slammed shut. The sound echoed through the house like the final strike of a hammer. Silence followed. The boy's chest rose and fell as he tried to understand. He whispered, "He is gone." The little girl's tears rolled down her cheeks, and her body shook with fear. The house felt larger now, but emptier. The shadows on the walls stretched, like claws. The wind howled outside, making the windows rattle. The floor creaked under every movement, as if the house itself was alive and watching them. The children huddled together in the corner. The girl asked, "Will he come back?" Her voice was small, almost too weak to hear. The boy wanted to say yes. He wanted to tell her that everything would be fine, but he could not lie. "I don't know," he said. His voice cracked. "I don't think so." They waited for hours. The fire had burned out, leaving only ashes. Hunger gnawed at their stomachs, sharper now that fear had no place to hide it. Their mother's memory haunted the room. She used to sit by the fire, telling them stories about faraway stars and brave humans who crossed the galaxies. But those days were gone. The night grew darker. The storm outside became louder, like the sky itself was angry. The children tried to sleep, but every sound made them jump. The door creaked in the wind. A shutter banged against the wall. Rats scratched in the corners. Suddenly, there was a sound different from the rest. A steady crunch of footsteps outside the door. Not the wild rush of the storm, but the heavy tread of someone walking. The boy sat up quickly, holding his sister close. "Listen," he whispered. The girl's wide eyes filled with new fear. He came back. The boy's heart beat fast. The steps grew closer, one after another, slow, deliberate. Whoever it was, they were not in a hurry. The wooden boards of the porch creaked under the weight. The children held their breath. A shadow moved under the crack of the door. For a moment they saw boots, large, heavy boots, different from the stepfather's. The boy's heart stopped. The doorknob turned. The little girl let out a small gasp and covered her mouth with her hands. The door opened slowly, the hinges crying out in protest. A figure stepped inside, tall and broad, shaking the snow from his shoulders. His face was hidden under the hood of a long coat. The stranger closed the door behind him, shutting out the storm. He stood in silence, looking around the broken house. His breath fogged the air. Then his eyes fell on the children. The boy tightened his arms around his sister. His voice trembled as he asked, "Who are you?" The stranger did not answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat. The children flinched, expecting something sharp. But when his hand came out, he was holding bread. Warm bread wrapped in cloth. The smell filled the cold air. The children stared at it. Their stomachs cried out. The man knelt down slowly, lowering himself so his eyes were level with theirs. His voice was deep but calm. "I will not hurt you," he said. "Eat. You need this more than I do." The boy did not move. He did not trust easily. But the girl's hunger was stronger than her fear. She stretched out her small hand, shaking, and touched the bread. The warmth of it made her eyes fill with tears again. The boy's breath caught. Suspense held the room in its grip. Was this stranger truly a savior, or another kind of danger? The fire was gone, and the only light came from the storm outside. Flashes of lightning lit the broken walls for a heartbeat before throwing the children back into shadows. The stranger's tall figure stood in the center of the room, silent and calm. The boy kept his arm around his sister, holding her tight. His eyes stayed on the bread in the stranger's hand, but his voice was sharp. "Why are you here? This house is not yours." The man's hood slipped back a little, revealing a human face. Pale from the cold, scarred across the cheek, with tired eyes that still carried a steady strength. His gaze softened as he looked at the two children. "I was searching for shelter," he said. His voice was low, steady, without anger. "The storm forced me here, but I did not expect to find you." He moved no closer, only kneeling with the bread still held out. The girl's lips trembled. Her hunger was pulling her forward, but fear kept her frozen. She looked at her brother, waiting for him to decide. The boy's heart beat fast. He remembered the cruel face of their stepfather, the way strangers in the village sneered. Trusting anyone had always brought more pain. Yet the smell of bread was too strong to ignore. His little sister was too weak. She needed it. He whispered, "Take it," and finally loosened his hold. The girl stepped forward, her small hands shaking as she reached out. The man placed the bread gently into her palms. She bit into it, and warmth spread through her body. Her eyes filled with tears of relief. The boy remained cautious. He asked again, "Who are you really? You are not from here. You are human." The man gave a small nod. "Yes, I am human. My name does not matter yet. I was lost, wandering, across this land trying to find a way back to my people." He looked at the girl eating slowly, then at the boy. "But tell me, why are children alone in a house during a storm?" The boy's throat tightened. For a moment he thought of lying, but the stranger's eyes were steady, waiting for the truth. At last he said, "Our stepfather left us. He said we were useless. He told us to starve." The man's jaw tightened, his eyes darkened. Anger rose in his chest, but he controlled it. He did not want to frighten them. "He left you to die?" he asked. The boy nodded once, his voice bitter. "He never wanted us. We eat too much," he said. "We are too weak." He was glad to leave. Silence filled the room again, broken only by the storm outside. The stranger looked at them both and then at the broken roof above. He could see the cold settling into their skin, the way their little bodies shook. Without fire, they would not last until morning. He stood up slowly. "Stay here," he said. He walked to the corner where broken wood lay and began to gather pieces. His strong hands worked quickly, stacking the wood, striking a spark until a small flame came alive. Within minutes, fire burned again in the empty house, bringing light and heat. The children's eyes widened. The girl smiled faintly, the first smile she had shown in weeks. She whispered, "Warm." The man sat by the fire, pulling off his wet gloves. His hands were rough, marked by scars, but steady. He glanced at the boy. "I will stay until the storm passes," he said. "You will not freeze tonight." The boy's suspicion did not vanish, but he felt a strange safety in the man's presence. No one had ever brought them food. No one had ever lit a fire for them since their mother's death. As the fire grew, the storm outside raged louder. The children leaned closer to its glow. The girl finally fell asleep in her brother's arms, her stomach full for the first time in days. The boy stayed awake, his eyes fixed on the stranger. "Will you leave us too?" he asked quietly. His voice carried both fear and challenge. The man looked at him across the fire. His face was tired, but his eyes were firm. "Not tonight," he answered. "You have been left too many times. I will not add my name to that list." The boy's chest tightened. He wanted to believe him, but believing had always led to pain. Still, something in the man's voice was different, stronger. The storm outside began to fade. The night grew quieter, though the wind still pressed against the walls. The man leaned back against the broken wall, his hand resting near a worn blade at his belt. He kept watch, his eyes never closing. The boy whispered to himself, "Who is he? Why does he care?" His eyelids grew heavy. Hunger and fear had drained him. At last he fell asleep beside his sister, the fire warming their small bodies. The human remained awake. He watched the children sleep, their faces pale but peaceful. At last, something stirred in his chest, an old feeling he thought was gone. He had lost his own family long ago, but looking at these children, something inside him whispered that maybe, just maybe, fate had brought him here for a reason. And as the night grew quiet, a shadow passed the window. Heavy steps in the snow, outside. The man's eyes sharpened. He reached for his blade, waiting as danger lingered just beyond the door. Morning came slowly. The storm outside had passed, but the house still stood in silence. Cold light entered through the broken windows, falling across the faces of the children. They woke up to the sound of crackling wood. The fire still burned, because the stranger had kept it alive all night. The boy rubbed his eyes and looked around. His sister was still asleep, her small face pressed against his shoulder. For a moment, he thought the events of the night had been a dream. But then he saw the man sitting near the door, his hood pulled back, watching the outside world with sharp eyes. The boy whispered, "You did not sleep." The man gave a short nod. "Not while you were unguarded. The storm hid more than cold. Wind, I heard things moving in the night. I chose to remain awake." The boy felt something strange in his chest. Protection. It was a feeling he had almost forgotten. He watched the man quietly, trying to understand him. No one had ever stayed awake to keep them safe. The girl stirred and sat up, rubbing her eyes. She saw the fire and smiled faintly. Then she remembered the bread and her hand went to her stomach. Hunger still remained, but it was weaker now. She looked at the man shyly. "Thank you," she whispered. The man only nodded once, his expression unreadable, but in his eyes there was a quiet warmth. From his bag he took another piece of bread, smaller this time. He broke it in half and handed it to both children. They took it quickly, eating with small bites, as if afraid it would vanish. The boy studied him while chewing. "Why are you giving us food? You don't even know us." The man's gaze turned toward the fire. For a long moment he said nothing. Then his voice came low. "Because I know what it means to be left behind. I know the emptiness of waiting. For someone who never returns." His hand tightened briefly on the hilt of the blade by his side. The boy and girl looked at each other. They did not know what past pain the human carried, but something in his tone was honest. The boy asked again, "Will you leave us when the storm is gone?" The man leaned forward, meeting his eyes. "That is your fear, not my plan. But trust is earned, not spoken. So I will not ask you to believe me yet." The boy frowned, confused by his words, but a part of him wanted to believe. The day grew brighter. The storm had left the ground covered in snow. The house, broken and weak, could not shelter them much longer. The man stood and said, "I will find more food. You two must stay here by the fire. Do not open the door for anyone, not even if you hear a familiar voice. Do you understand? The girl nodded quickly, but the boy hesitated. What if it is our stepfather? The man's eyes grew sharp. Especially then. If he returns, you stay hidden. I will deal with him. The boy's stomach tightened at the thought. He gave a slow nod. The man left, stepping into the frozen morning. The children sat in silence after he was gone. The boy whispered, "He will come back, won't he?" The girl hugged her knees, whispering back, "I think he will." Hours passed slowly. The fire burned low and the house creaked. The children listened to every sound. Hunger began to rise again, but they waited. At last, the door opened, and the human stepped inside. His coat was heavy with snow, but his arms carried food, dried meat, roots, and a small jug of water. He set it down before them. The girl's eyes widened, and she quickly began to eat. The boy looked at him carefully. "You came back." The man gave a faint smile. "I said I would, and I will again." That night they ate together by the fire. The girl laughed for the first time in weeks, crumbs on her lips. The boy still remained quiet, but his heart began to soften. He studied the human's hands, strong but gentle, the way he broke food into equal pieces without keeping the larger share for himself. When the girl finally fell asleep, the boy whispered, "Why do you care if we live or die? You are not our father. You are not even of our kind." The man looked into the fire for a long moment before answering. His voice was steady. "Blood does not decide family. Choice does." The boy fell silent. His heart beat faster. No one had ever spoken such words to him before. Outside, the snow cracked under a distant footstep. The man's head turned sharply, his hand moving to his blade. He stood slowly, his body tense. He whispered, "Stay here, do not move." The boy's breath caught. The girl stirred in her sleep. The man moved toward the door. Shadows passed. Across the window, more than one figure moving outside. The boy grabbed his sister and pulled her close. Fear returned like fire in his chest. Was it the stepfather or something worse? The human placed his hand on the door and listened. The silence stretched thin. The children's hearts pounded. Then, with one swift motion, he pulled the door open. Cold. Air rushed in, and with it, danger waiting on the threshold. The morning sun broke through the clouds, painting the snow in pale light. The storm had passed, but silence hung heavy over the land. The human stood at the door with his blade in hand, watching the shapes that had moved outside during the night. When he stepped out, he saw only broken tracks in the snow, as if shadows had tested the house but decided not to enter. His eyes narrowed. Danger was near, and it was not done. Inside, the children huddled together by the fire. Their faces lifted when he returned. The boy asked quickly, "Who was it?" The man shook his head. "Not your stepfather. Others. But we will not wait here to find out more. This house cannot protect you. We must leave." The boy hesitated. His eyes flickered to his sleeping sister. "Leave where?" The man's gaze turned toward the valley. "To the village. You cannot survive in an empty house with broken walls. In the village, there is food and fire. But you must be strong, because not everyone will welcome you." The boy's chest tightened. He remembered the whispers, the cruel laughter. The villagers had always despised them. Yet there was no choice. He nodded. By midday, the three of them walked down the frozen path. The human walked ahead, steady and tall, his cloak shielding the children from the sharp wind. The girl clung to his side, while the boy walked stiffly behind, alert to every sound. The village appeared slowly through the trees, roofs heavy with snow, smoke rising from chimneys, doors closed against the cold. It should have been a place of warmth, but for the children, it was only a place of shame. As they entered the narrow streets, faces turned, doors cracked open. Eyes peered from behind windows. Voices rose in whispers that quickly grew louder. "Look," the stepfather finally cast them out. "They are cursed children, nothing but trouble. And that is a human with them." Why would a human waste time on them? The children lowered their heads, their steps slowing. The boy's fists clenched. The girl pressed closer to the man, hiding against his cloak. The human stopped in the center of the street. His eyes scanned the crowd, calm but firm. He spoke, clearly, his voice carrying. These children are not curses, they are not trash, they were abandoned, and yet they still live. That is strength, the villagers murmured. Some sneered, others shook their heads. An older alien with deep lines across his face stepped forward. Human, you do not understand. Those children are a burden. Their stepfather was right to leave them. Why should we feed them when they take more than they give? The boy's face burned with shame. The girl began to cry softly. But before the boy could speak, the man placed a hand on his shoulder. His voice turned hard as iron. Because they are alive. Because no child deserves to starve in the cold while others eat. If you turn your eyes away, then the shame is not on them. It is on you. The street fell silent. The villagers looked at each other. Some lowered their eyes, uncomfortable under his words. Others muttered angrily. A heavy voice rose above the rest. Bold words for a stranger. The stepfather stood at the end of the street. His figure was broad, his coat torn from travel, his eyes filled with fury. He had returned sooner than anyone expected. The children froze. The boy's breath caught in his chest. The girl hid behind the human's leg, trembling. The stepfather's mouth twisted into a cruel smile. So, the useless mouths found themselves a protector, a human, no less. Tell me, did he feed you better than I did? Did he whisper lies about care and love? The man's hand rested lightly near his blade, but he did not draw it. His voice was calm but sharp. They need no lies, only truth. And the truth is, you abandoned them. The stepfather laughed, a harsh sound that cut through the cold air. I left because they are weak. Look at them. Thin, shaking, worthless. You think you can make them strong? You are a fool, human. The villagers stirred. Some nodded, agreeing. Others stayed quiet, watching the scene unfold. The human stepped forward, standing tall between the stepfather and the children. His voice carried again, louder this time. Weakness is not in hunger, weakness is in cruelty, and cruelty is what you chose. The stepfather's face darkened. He spat at the ground. Then take them. But know this, they will drag you down. And when they fail you, do not come back here asking for help. The man's jaw tightened, but he did not move aside. He turned to the villagers and raised his voice once more. If you see them as curses, then I will take the curse upon myself. If you see them as burdens, then let me carry the weight. But remember this, one day the measure of your hearts will be judged not by your strength, but by how you treated the smallest among you. The silence that followed was heavy. The stepfather's eyes narrowed with hate, but he did not attack. Instead, he turned away, his cloak whipping behind him as he stormed off down the road. The villagers slowly dispersed, some whispering, some silent with shame. The children stood close to the human, their hearts pounding. The boy whispered, "Why did you say that for us? Why did you fight with words when you could have walked away?" The man looked down at him, his eyes steady. Because you are worth defending, even if they do not see it yet. The boy said nothing more. But for the first time, a small spark of trust began to grow inside him. The village did not return to peace after the stepfather's words. Whispers grew in every corner, and the children felt the weight of every stare. The human kept them close, his tall frame shielding them from the eyes that judged. But deep inside, he knew the stepfather's return was not the end. It was only the beginning. By evening, the villagers gathered again in the square. The stepfather stood at the center, his voice rising above the crowd. "Look at him," he shouted, pointing at the human. "A wanderer, an outsider. He dares to shame us in our own streets. And for what? For these children who drain food and give nothing back." The crowd muttered, some nodding, others uneasy. The human stood silent, his hands at his sides, calm but ready. The stepfather's voice grew sharper. If he believes they are worth saving, let him prove it. Let him face me, strength against strength. If he wins, then let him take them, but if he loses, he leaves this place in disgrace and the children return to what they are. Nothing. The boy's breath caught. His sister clung to his arm, whispering, "He cannot fight him. He will be hurt." But the human stepped forward, his eyes locked on the stepfather. His voice was steady. "If that is what it takes, I accept." The villagers gasped. A circle formed in the square, boots crunching on the frozen ground as the crowd pressed closer. Torches were lit, their flames throwing long shadows across the snow. The boy pulled at the man's coat. "Don't do this. He is stronger. He is crueler. He will not fight fair." The man looked down at him, his expression calm. "Strength is not in fists alone. Watch closely. Learn." The stepfather threw off his coat, revealing thick arms and scarred skin. His grin was full of confidence. He had fought many in his life, and he had always won. The human removed his own cloak, standing leaner but unshaken, scars of his own carved into his body. The air grew heavy. The villagers fell silent as the two men stepped into the circle. The stepfather struck first. His fist swung like a hammer aimed at the human's jaw, but the human moved quick as wind and the blow missed. The stepfather stumbled, his grin fading. The human's counter was sharp and precise, a strike to the ribs that made the larger man grunt in pain. The villagers gasped. They had expected the human to fall quickly, but instead he stood like steel. The stepfather roared and charged again, his fists flying, his kicks heavy. Each strike was filled with rage, but the human moved with discipline, his eyes sharp, his body steady. He blocked, dodged, and answered with blows that were not wild but controlled. Each strike landed where it mattered most. The children watched, with wide eyes. The boy's heart raced, torn between fear and hope. The girl whispered, "He is not losing." Blood trickled from the stepfather's lip. His chest rose and fell heavily. Rage burned hotter in his eyes. He grabbed for a wooden staff near the edge of the circle and swung it with all his strength. The crowd gasped. The fight had turned dangerous. The human did not flinch. He stepped aside, letting the staff crack against the frozen ground. Splinters flew. Before the stepfather could swing again, the human caught the weapon, twisted it sharply, and snapped it in two. The pieces fell into the snow. The stepfather staggered back, his face red with fury and disbelief. The human advanced slowly, his voice low but carrying. "You think cruelty is strength, but strength is standing when others fall. Strength is protecting, not breaking." The stepfather shouted and lunged again, his fists desperate. The human blocked, struck once to the stomach, once to the chest, then finished with a blow that sent the larger man crashing into the snow. The square fell silent. The stepfather lay groaning, his pride broken more than his body. The human stood over him, breathing hard but steady. His blade remained sheathed at his side. The villagers stared, stunned. No one had ever defeated the stepfather before. The boy's heart pounded. He had never seen anyone fight like that. Not with wild rage, but with calm power. For the first time, he felt something stir inside him. Hope. The stepfather spat blood and glared up. "Finish it. Kill me, human. Prove your strength." The human shook his head. "Strength is not murder. You are beaten. That is enough." He turned away, walking back to the children. The villagers whispered among themselves. Some bowed their heads in shame. Others looked at the human with new respect. The boy stepped forward, his voice trembling but full of awe. You beat him, and you did not kill him." The man placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Because victory without mercy is only another form of cruelty. Remember that." The girl hugged the man tightly, her eyes full of tears. "You are our real father now." The human froze for a moment, the words striking deep. His eyes softened, and for the first time in years he allowed himself to smile. But in the shadows beyond the torches, the stepfather crawled away, his eyes burning with hate. The fight was not the end. It was the beginning of something darker. The fight ended, but its echoes lingered in the village square. Torches burned low and villagers slowly drifted back to their homes, whispering about the human who had defeated the cruel stepfather. Some carried respect in their eyes, others only doubt, but none could ignore what they had witnessed. The human walked back to the children, his breath still heavy from the battle. The boy looked up at him with wide eyes, a storm of thoughts racing inside. The girl clung to his arm, her small face pressed against his sleeve as if afraid he might vanish if she let go. "You are safe now," the man said softly. His voice was calm, but his body carried the weight of pain. Bruises were already forming on his ribs. Still he stood tall. The boy studied him carefully. He had seen many fighters before, men who fought for pride, men who fought for cruelty. But this fight had been different. The human had fought for them, and more than that, he had shown mercy when the stepfather begged for death. The boy whispered, "Why didn't you end him? He would have ended you." The man knelt so his eyes met the boy's. His voice was steady. "Because ending him would make me like him. Mercy is harder than cruelty, but mercy is what gives strength meaning." The boy swallowed hard. For the first time he felt not just safety, but something deeper. Respect. That night, the human built a fire near the edge of the village. He did not want to remain in the center where whispers grew heavy, so he chose a quiet place where the children could rest. He set food before them, bread, meat, and water. The girl ate quickly, her hunger stronger than her fear. The boy ate, slower, watching the man with careful eyes. When their stomachs were full, the girl leaned against the man's side, her voice soft. "Will you stay with us, or will you leave when the road calls you again?" The question hung heavy in the air. The boy turned to listen, his heart tense as if bracing for disappointment. The human looked into the fire, the flames reflecting in his tired eyes. "I have walked alone for many years. My path was always my own, but tonight I think the road has given me something I did not expect." He glanced at them, his expression unreadable but his tone gentle. "I will not leave you." The girl's face lit with relief. She wrapped her small arms around him, whispering, "Then you are our father now." The man's breath caught. The words struck deep inside his chest. Long ago, he had held his own child. Long ago, he had lost everything to war and distance. He thought those feelings were gone, buried with his past. Yet now, looking at these children who had nothing, he felt something awaken again, a bond stronger than blood. The boy remained quiet, his face shadowed by doubt. But inside, something was shifting. He had trusted no one since their mother's death. But now he had seen with his own eyes what this man had done. Still, fear lingered. Fear that promises would break. Fear that kindness was only temporary. Later, that night, the human lay awake while the children slept by the fire. The girl dreamed peacefully, but the boy's sleep was restless. The man reached out, placing a steady hand on his shoulder, whispering, "Rest. You are not alone anymore." The boy stirred but did not wake. For the first time in years, someone had spoken those words to him. Morning came with clear skies. The village was still wary of them, but no one dared challenge the human after what had happened. The children walked beside him as he began to build a small shelter near the woods, away from prying eyes. His hands worked with quiet skill, shaping wood, lighting fires, teaching them small tasks. The girl laughed as she carried sticks, proud to be useful. The boy listened carefully as the man showed him how to hold a blade not for cruelty, but for defense. Every lesson carried the same truth. Strength was not in hurting, but in protecting. Slowly, the boy began to see him not as a stranger, but as something closer to what he had lost. He whispered one evening as they ate, "Maybe you are right. Maybe family is choice." The man gave no grand speech. He only nodded once, his eyes steady and kind. "It always is." But shadows still lingered at the edge of peace. The stepfather had crawled away in the dark, and his hatred burned like fire. In the silence of the forest, he swore revenge. The children did not know this yet. They only knew the warmth of a fire, the taste of food, and the strange comfort of belonging. For the first time since their mother's death, they felt safe. And for the first time, the human felt that his long road of loneliness might have finally led him where he was meant to be. The days that followed were different from anything the children had known before. The empty silence of their old house was gone. In its place was the sound of chopping wood, the crackle of fire, and the quiet voice of the human teaching them small lessons each day. The girl carried water from the stream, laughing when she spilled it on her hands. The boy watched carefully as the man showed him how to cut wood without wasting strength. Their new shelter grew piece by piece, shaped by steady hands. It was small, built from broken timber and stone, but it felt warmer than the stepfather's large house had ever felt. At night, they sat by the fire. The man told stories of faraway worlds, ships that crossed the stars, humans who fought not for cruelty but for honor, families who chose each other not by blood but by heart. The girl listened with wide eyes, her small hands clapping when he finished. The boy said little, but inside him the walls of fear began to break. One evening, as the sun set behind the trees, the boy finally asked the question he had held for days. Why do you do this? You could have left us. You could be far from here finding your own people. Why stay? The man was quiet for a moment, watching the fire. Then he said, Because I lost once. I lost my family to war. Since then I walked alone, with nothing but silence for company. But when I saw you both, hungry, abandoned, waiting for someone to care, I remembered what it means to belong. I will not walk away again. The boy's throat tightened. He looked down, hiding, the way his eyes burned. He whispered, Then you are our father now? The man reached across the fire, resting his hand on the boy's shoulder. His voice was low but sure. If you will have me, then yes. The boy did not answer at once. His heart was heavy with years of mistrust. Yet the truth was clear. This man had fought for them, fed them, protected them. He was not their blood, but he was more of a father than the one who had left them to die. Slowly, the boy nodded. The girl who had been listening crawled closer and wrapped her arms around the man's waist. We choose you, she said, her small voice bright with certainty. The man closed his eyes. For the first time in many years, tears touched his face, though he did not hide them. He held them both close, whispering, Then I choose you too. From this day forward, you are mine and I am yours. The fire burned warmly, and for a moment the world outside felt far away. But shadows never sleep forever. At the edge of the forest, the stepfather watched. His eyes glowed with hate, his breath sharp in the cold air. His pride was broken, his power taken, but inside him burned a hunger for revenge. He whispered into the night, You think you stole them from me? Human? You think you can take what was mine? I will return, and when I do, you will beg for mercy. The wind carried his words into the trees, but the human did not hear. He sat by the fire with the children, teaching them how to tie knots, how to read the stars. His heart, once empty, now held a new weight, not of loneliness, but of belonging. Bikiryu. Boy trained with him each day, learning how to hold his ground, how to fight not with rage but with control. The girl learned to gather food, to build small fires, to laugh without fear. Step by step, their lives changed. The villagers, too, began to see differently. Some came quietly with food, others offered wood or tools. They did not speak apologies, but their actions carried them. The memory of the fight had planted respect in their hearts. As the season shifted, the small shelter became a home. Walls rose stronger, a roof that no longer leaked, and a fire that never died. The children grew brighter, their faces no longer hollow with hunger. One night, as they lay under the stars, the boy whispered to his sister, Do you remember when we thought we would die in that empty house? The girl nodded softly. I remember. But he came. The boy looked at the human who sat sharpening his blade by the fire. His voice grew firm. He came, and now we are not alone. We are a family. The man raised his head at the words. For a long moment he said nothing, but his eyes held a quiet pride. And so the children who had once been abandoned now had something greater than they ever dreamed. Not riches, not a grand house, but a father who chose them and a bond no cruelty could break. The stepfather still lingered in the shadows, waiting for his chance to strike again. But whatever storm he carried, the human was ready. Because this time, he was not only fighting for himself, he was fighting for his family,